Live. This is our special series, Creativity and Media as Resistance, continuing our conversations about putting the things in the world, uplifting the values that we want to see, and being who we are in this current political, social, cultural climate that we are in here in the United States and a little bit globally too, I think. It's not just here in the US, it just happens to be where we are. I have with me the one and only Elsie Escobar, who is probably, I would say, if Elsie did not exist in this industry, I don't know if the Creative Impostor would be here right now existing. Elsie, you're one of the, I think you know this, but you're one of the first podcasters I ever discovered when someone was like, back in the yoga days when I had a yoga studio, and you were also teaching yoga. And somebody said to me, "Oh, you should start a podcast." And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And then I found Elsie's yoga class, which I believe was your first podcast.
Correct.
And then, time went on, yoga studios closed, Elsie stops making Elsie's yoga class. And I found you again by mistake when I finally came around to podcasting. And I think I found She Podcasts first. And I was like, wait, that's Elsie from Elsie's yoga class.
Oh my gosh, full circle.
So yes, I don't know if there would be a Creative Impostor podcast or Creative Impostor Studios without Elsie, but Elsie, how do you do so many things within the podcasting industry, within the content creator economy? How do you, in a nutshell, describe what your role is in this space?
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. One of the key things I've really been thinking about this. And part of it is that I'm always championing the independent voices. It's something that I always come back to. And yes, when I first started, that is really where I stepped into it because it felt so attainable. It felt so empowering. It felt like there were no gatekeepers and anybody could get behind the microphone and do all these things. And I was deeply inspired by how amazing independent creators were. I was floored by the fact that there were so many people who just put up their studios in their homes and they were creating amazing podcasts and having conversations. And, I very much was inspired by Father Roderick, not Dr. Father Roderick, which at that time had a podcast right at the beginning, like when podcasting basically started in 2005, called The Catholic Insider. And what he would do is he was carrying like a recorder at the Vatican, and he was reporting from the Vatican floor and he was capturing the sounds of what was going on when there was like a new pope that was going to be chosen and all of these things. And I was blown away by a priest with a recorder walking around the Vatican and giving, and not just in the Vatican, but in many other things. Something that I learned was called sound seeing tours. And he would walk around and he would, I remember him doing this thing on the wall of China, and I was floored, and I thought, I want to do, like he's doing it, I want to do it. There were so many other people that were doing really interesting things, and therefore I thought everybody needs to listen to these humans, these everyday humans that have experiences, and it allowed me to know and to connect with the world in a way that I never thought I could. And up to this day, I still feel the voices of the everyday people, the voices of humanity are the most important. The ones that grab a mic and they start to record, regardless of audio quality, even though, of course, we know all of these things matter. Of course, we know. So I'm not saying what else that everybody else is going to be like rolling their eyes. But just the fact that you can grab a microphone and begin the process of chronicling life, of having the intimate conversations come forward, that you get a chance to put on a director's cap, a producer's cap, an editor's cap, and you are just an everyday person. That to me is still the most powerful part. And the fact that those audiences want to listen to that is astounding, because you would think that, oh, they're only looking for the fancy stuff, all the pristine, highly produced, beautiful things. But a lot of people actually are not looking for that. They're just looking for the everyday communications. And so I'm still there. I'm still supporting that independent podcaster, the independent voice, their pains, their needs, their frustrations, them being overlooked, discounted, not acknowledged. I'm still there. That's what I do.
And you also have the vantage point through the work that you do with Libsyn as the director of community and content. Libsyn being one of the, are they the longest podcast hosting company? Were they the first? Are they
Yes.
okay? I was like, I
Yes.
think so.
We're the OG. Is the OG. So they began in November, I think 8th, 2004. So,
I
yeah.
always have to explain to people, I'm like, their name means liberated syndication, because they're like,
Yeah.
Libsyn, what's that? And I'm like,
Yeah.
liberated syndication, because it meant that you could, without the gatekeepers, that it would facilitate you not needing to know how to do RSS feed coding
Mhm.
on your own to create your show and distribute it independently. And so through your work with Libsyn especially, you have the vantage point of being able to see everyone from like the smallest startup independent podcaster to the bigger brands and the more visible celebrity podcasters and the people who are part of networks and things like that. You have the full range of view of everything that's happening. Did you always think of yourself as like an advocate within the space of podcasting as a thing in general, and then also of these independent or more marginalized voices even? Was that from the beginning, or did that come about, like that kind of thinking, did that come about later?
That came about later. I don't think that that was something that I went in, doing. There was always a sense of sort of justice in how I approached most of the things that I did in my life. So there was always this sense of advocacy within my life, speaking about folks that were overlooked, marginalized people, you know, all of the sort of quantifiers for that. It was just something that I naturally moved towards. And within podcasting, I think that it started to shift a little bit more when the more industry side of things started to come through. And it was, I think at first it was really just disheartening because, like I mentioned before, those voices that were the everyday voices that were putting themselves out there were starting to be what I perceived to be as discounted or not enough in some way. That was my perception, um, because you needed to have studied broadcasting and or audio production. You were coming from legacy models, primarily from the coastal models in the larger cities, where having worked in public radio, public media, uh, it rendered you to have a sense of importance and more value, more perceived value than those voices that had self-taught at home, put their hands dirty, were starting to figure out how to level audio, how to duck audio, how to render audio. There was just like all kinds of things that nobody really knows what to do with, but they were able to do it. They started to understand what RSS feeds were and how to get all that stuff in there. And so that knowledge was in my perception as I started to see the industry start to grow, that they were overlooked and that there was a certain level of, oh, they're just an indie podcast, or they're just, one of those podcasters. And I didn't like that. I did not like that. I didn't appreciate that. And it made me sort of step into that role a little bit more. First, it was like a holistically. And then I started to kind of notice a little bit more about the lack of representation in terms of who was behind the mic and who was being talked about and who was being featured and who was being quoted and all of that. And therefore, the women in podcasting started to pop up a little bit more. And then later on, more of the marginalized voices and diversity aspect, the racial inequities that I started to see, or the lack of representation in terms of who we were, again, in the same way, who we were quoting, who we were talking about, who was being featured, all of that started to sort of bubble up a little bit more. And my eyes were going like, wait, it doesn't seem like things are really shifting here. And that's kind of where I started to shift a little for myself.
Yeah, I have to say, this is gonna get me in trouble. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say, but I am currently on the judging panel for a podcasting award organization, and we're in judging right now. And the way that they have you judge the shows is, or the way that they're doing it this year is they serve you one show at a time to rate on certain metrics on a scale of 1 to 10 and then give your comments. And so there's like maybe 4 or 5 metrics depending on the category. And the way they're doing it this year is that they're giving you like 10 shows in a row that are all in the same category. So you're not
Mhm.
necessarily seeing every show that was submitted or every episode that was submitted for that category, but you are seeing 10 within that same category. So you can kind of like compare what's in the category. And one of the categories that I was served was branded podcasts thought leadership.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I was like, okay. And of the 10 in a row that they served me, do you want to guess how many were about AI?
9.
7. Close.
Oh, okay.
So
Close.
so 7 thought leadership podcasts about AI. And I was like, okay, I am now officially an AI expert in a way that I
Yeah.
never wanted to be. And of those 7 AI podcasts, how many were hosted by men?
7. No, I know.
Yes. Uh-huh. And then we can even break it down further. How many of those were white men and how
Yeah,
many
yeah,
of
yeah.
them were white men interviewing white men? And I was like, oh, still. And again, it's not representative of the entire category. It just happens to be the 10 shows that they served me from that category. But it becomes a little like, okay, and thought leadership, like thought leadership is a category that I think should be more diverse. Like just in the content, like the context of what is thought leadership. It's not just white men working in tech who are leading thought, right?
Mhm. Right,
But
right.
but maybe those are the people or the companies or the networks, because a lot of them were produced because it was in the branded podcast space. So they were companies like Microsoft or IBM or
Yeah.
something like that that are submitting those shows. So maybe that is what those entities perceive as thought leadership, is coming from that specific demographic. Um, and of course, not saying that white men cannot be part of thought leadership, of course, but I just was a little like disheartened that that was the thoughts all sort of blend together when they're all coming from that same vantage point. So I'm curious for you, when you say representation, what does that look like for you? What does a more inclusive or a more diverse podcasting landscape look like?
I think it really does have to do with so many layers. And I think every single one of us has a role to play in this. And it's not a one size fits all, right? There is an opportunity for discourse in the social space for sure, because people do call this stuff out, right? We would talk about lists there. It's not diverse enough. It's calling out panels, where like there's just the same dudes, or it's calling out speaking, virtual events. Like those are things that you can see. And there are times when there is social discord, and that is one layer to being able to call that stuff out, right? In a public setting in some way. Sometimes there is um impact, and that impact primarily impacts the people who are creating said content for larger organizations. You kind of remember the pain of having to go like, oh my God, I have to, even if it's done for the wrong reasons, meaning even if it's like, I just don't want to be called out. Let me make sure that, right, at least there's a different thought process that's going into the creation of these things, that you are being proactive in making sure that you are having your hands a little bit deeper into the thought. And the other layers are usually the ones that a lot of us don't see. And I think that this is where we can all participate. And just because you're not posting it online doesn't mean that you're not doing the work. And this is the part where I feel like personal responsibility really comes into play, which it isn't about let me call people out on social. This is about having one-on-one conversations with team members. This is about introducing and having a conversation with another producer and or friend or organization where you can highlight a person or say like, hey, what would be really wonderful if you had this type of a lineup, or is this something that you value, or bringing it back. And when you're talking to companies and or you are developing businesses, even as an independent producer or serving podcasters or developing, and your newsletter, being mindful about making choices on your own without anybody calling you out, because you are that kind of a human where you can go like, wow, you know what? I've been featuring all of these types of shows or all of these types of voices. I wonder if I should diversify that, or even at the most simplest level. And I promise you, if you did this for yourself, just to make yourself a promise to yourself, to diversify the consumption that you have in your eyes and in your ears. And just go out of your way to break your own patterns and search. And I want to, excuse me. I have this thing now that every time I'm behind the microphone, I start to get like gruckies in
Oh.
my throat, and I don't understand why that. Excuse me.
Sure.
Okay. And again, it's not, and I challenge people to not just go on social. And it just drives me nuts when people go on social and they're like, hey, I really need to have more Latino voices in my ears. Who is out there that I need to be listening to? How about you do your own research? How about you go into a podcast app and you consume different types of content? How about you just expand your search within a category that you love? Maybe you're really into parenting toddlers at this time, and this is a issue that you really want to know a lot about. And you, instead of sticking to the top 3 that are going to be served to you, dive into the entire category. Just go look at all the different voices and listen, search, look into different types of parenting styles, and you will find diverse voices in there. There's so many. And that's the part that is the most I think frustrating for me is that there are so many. There are so many voices, and we are not doing the work to take our time and to be patient because we want instant gratification. We just want whatever's the first, and we don't go beyond anything else. That's on us.
Well, and also, I think there's also the what the what is getting promoted or the what pops up first or the what has a bigger marketing or
Right.
advertising
Yeah.
budget. And so I'm curious for and even in my 10 years of experience in this space, it used to be that I could help somebody launch an independent show, maybe a small business owner, entrepreneur, or something like that. And certainly they had to market it and certainly they had to promote it, but it didn't take a ton of work for them to start to find their audience. Like it would kind of happen a little bit by magic. Like I used to in my marketing, like, best practices back then, one of the things at the bottom of the checklist was the magic of Apple Podcasts, which was not called Apple Podcasts. It was
Mhm.
called iTunes. The magic of iTunes was one of my marketing strategies. Like, I don't know. It just happens. Like, people just find you. And that is not the case so much anymore. Now you really
No.
do have to put more intention, more effort, more thought into helping your audience to find you. And when we're talking about this idea of media as resistance, I know there's been a lot of coverage about certain creators and certain people with large followings who they say, oh, well, Trump won the election because he went on this podcast or because this person platformed, these ideals or whatever it is. And I'm kind of curious for independent creators who are creating media that upholds the values that they want to see. How do we what is our responsibility? Like, how do we make ourselves more visible? How do we get heard in this like noisy mediascape that we're in now?
It's I've been really, really thinking about this like big time because of not even the new folks that are coming into the scene, but more in a selfish way, some of us who've been around for a long time that there is, and you know this because we've been working together for such a long time, but there's a certain narrative that keeps coming up, which is the letting go of things. It's the transitional state where, as human beings, we do this all the time. And I think in podcasting, now that podcasting has been around for 2 decades, the trends that I'm seeing is that the legacy content, the people who started early on, it's culminating in some way around the 10-year mark. It doesn't have to be that. There's people going through that prior and after, but they're coming to a close. They are closing their work, whatever that might be. And it's not necessarily, some people are doing it because they're tired, right? And then some people are doing it because it's over. They're no longer the person that started their show and they're not interested anymore. We all go through that. Somebody who's going through this right now is Mark Maron, right, from WTF with Mark Maron, who was a Seminole person, and he's putting the mic down for many. I'm sure a lot of personal reasons, and I think it feels to me that it's time to let it go. Sometimes it's time to let it go. And my biggest concern about that is because of the way that media is moving now so fast, it feels like the impact, the legacy, the relevancy of these voices is as much as we're saying that it's important, it's not. And I can see a world where there's a lot of people who won't have an idea who Mark Maron was and his importance in the space. And if Mark Maron can't be remembered, what about us? You know what I mean? It's like, hello. And so there's a part where within this space before, when you set up person's name, at least within podcasting, people would go, oh yeah, that's the person that did XYZ, or yeah, they began this thing, or all of that stuff. That's who they are. But those stories are only as important as the people telling those stories. It's like me talking about Mark, right? It's about me talking about these people, or like Father Roderick. It's about me saying that, because nobody's going to go, Father Roderick had a Catholic insider in the early 2005 and he was covering the Vatican. Like nobody's going to say that. Nobody even knows that. Whereas at the beginning, everybody knew Father Roderick, whether you were Catholic or not. A podcasting priest at that time was quite memorable, right? And so we remember, and those stories continue on. But a lot of us, our stories are not. And so I've been sitting with this. And what did I do? Speaking of AI, Andrea, I did a little bit of deep research, and I did a little bit of deep research, posing my question for myself, thinking about impact and claiming legacy and memory and remembrance and all of that. And I put that into deep research for Google Gemini. And I'm going to read you. So one of the really interesting things that Gemini found is, it said, the primary challenge lies in overcoming the fragmentation of her digital presence and formalizing her organically grown product portfolio into a cohesive and scalable business model. This is for me. And so it was interesting that what a Gemini said to me is that my digital footprint is large, but it's fragmented. And there's no place where you can get all the things of me. And so the thing that it told me was basically find the home base, and be able to start to build off of that so that it's an easy, findable thing, which for a creator, you don't really think too much about it. I think that was the part where before it was a little bit easier to just put your podcast out or just, add things online and not really claim your space. And what it made me see is that in the world that we're living now, it's our responsibility to map out how to grab all those pieces and put it into a place so that people can find it. And I'm not saying like just specific people, but the models that are looking for the information, and all the darn bots. And part of it is that you can find a ton of information about me, about my work, about my impact in the space, about all of these things, but it's everywhere. And being able to begin to put it in a place that is not as fragmented, and I get to choose it and own it, is the thing, right? And so I'm really, really kind of sitting with that. And of course, the first thing that comes into my head is a website. As simple as that, right? And being able to harness all of that information and put it in there. And questions are coming up like, I'm doing this with you, right? So I'm having this conversation with you. You are going to be putting that on your website and or your social channels, which is great. And I appreciate that. And I think that's exposure. But then there is that element of how it is my responsibility to be able to then leverage this conversation and in some way place it also in a way that comes back to me. What does that look like? So I'm starting to think through that in a way that's sustainable, because that's another one of my tenets, in a way in which we can continue to do our work, in which we can not feel exhausted because we have very important work to do. And what does that look like? How do I tell that story? How do I honor, and of course, coming from where I come from, how do I honor your work? How do I do it in a way that is not usurping what you are doing in your work by putting it on my my platform? So those are all things that I'm trying to work through. But I was really intrigued by the assessment. It was kind of a hard lesson to learn. Um, and so I feel our responsibility is to start to find how do we pull that in? How do we defragment, I guess, and make it a collective place that I own. So I teach, this is who I am. And these are the places that I've been, but this is where you find out all the things.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I was just doing I've been, as you know, because we have been working together for so
Yeah.
long, I have been very resistant to the AI and the bots of it all. And I was just using ChatGPT to help with a grant application for a project that I'm collaborating with an organization on, and having it rewrite my bio by, like pulling whatever it can find from the internet was fascinating because there were certain things that it said that I was like, "Oh yeah, that is pretty cool." That like, "Oh, yes, that is." And then there were certain things that it made up
Hmm.
in the context of the thing that I was applying for. Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
it
Yeah, yeah.
made up history that did not exist for me, and I was like, where is AI gaslighting me right now? Like, that is not
Yeah.
I did not grow up it said, specifically, this is, the project has to do with rivers and rafting and nature conservancy, and it said, "Andrea's love for river rafting began at an early age." And I was like,
What?
"What?" Like, where's it? It's making up a history that didn't exist. I was like, "Oh my gosh. Look, am I gonna start thinking that I began my love for river rafting at an early age because the AI said that I did?" So, that's kind of a side tangent, but I'm a little bit, like, worried about, yes, it's finding details about me on the internet and things like that, but it's also making things up about me, which makes me a little concerned when, if they say that people are moving away from just doing normal Google searches and they're, like, asking ChatGPT for things, and I'm like, "What if somebody wants to learn more about me and ChatGPT is making stuff up about me that is not even true?"
Yeah. No, it's challenging, and I think that the contextualization of that is really important. There's another layer that I started to think through, and one thing that is good is that if we can transcribe, because it's so much easier now to be able to transcribe, interviews and podcasts and all of that stuff. We were looking at it from the perspective of serving folks who are, that have challenge, like are just visually challenged, or um, not visually challenged, or like audio challenged. Like, they have a harder time being able to listen to something in their ears and whatnot. And um, I found that because I was explicit when I requested some of the deep search to focus on podcast episodes and videos that had been transcribed. And it did give a much deeper layered response because these podcast episodes did transcribe my words, and it called it out and said, one of the key things that you could do to claim essentially your legacy is to transcribe your own stuff and have it transcribed, because part of it is that those are my words. That is literally me. And so it is a way for you to find out about somebody through their voices.
Mm.
And so that was really interesting to me, being able to quantify that. No
Mm.
way.
I want to shift the conversation a little bit away from advocating for podcasting and supporting other people in doing their work and getting their voices heard. You are also a creator. As we're talking about, you're putting a lot of content out into the world, a lot of messaging, and you're showing up in these different places here. Thank you very much. And one of the ways that we've worked together is through a program that is called the E-League, and that is a mentoring program for those indie voices for podcasting that comes up about twice a year now, right? Is the rhythm that you're looking at. And so the E-League, I think I've done 3 rounds officially of the E-League, and every time I get some different benefit, some different insight, out of it. I like to refer to you as the podcasting oracle. You can always kind of see a little bit further down the road than what I can see, which is helpful in orienting the direction that I wanna go. Um, but in the most recent round, you had shared something kind of personal about the current, things that we're experiencing here in the United States, specifically around immigration and the way the administration is handling, is that the right word? The
Mhm.
way the administration is going about the question, challenge, whatever, of immigration in this country. And you had shared kind of personally in the group with us your own personal story around this. And it's, I'm bringing it up, and you can share as much or as little as you want, but I'm bringing it up because I know that for a lot of us, the work of being a creator, the work of putting media out there, the work of podcasting, the work of whatever it is that we're doing, being an entrepreneur, being a solo business owner, it's already a lot at times,
Mhm.
and it can already be overwhelming. And then I started this series on the podcast because this year I was like, I can't do any of this work because the world is crumbling. The country is crumbling. Everything is wrong. Who am I to be like trying to make a podcast about creativity or like, help somebody edit their show about business when things are falling apart? And it was really heavy, and it's a daily struggle. It's a daily struggle for me to like wake up, see what's happening in the world, and then go about my business and take care of what I need to take care of here. And so I'm wondering what you can say about this topic, in terms of the world at large and what's going on that's been difficult for you to navigate as a creator.
Yeah, oh gosh,
It's a
this
big
is what
topic too.
no, it's a big topic, and I don't know if I'm gonna get into direct specifics of my experience because I think it's hard to talk about.
Mhm.
Um, it's hard to talk about. That said, this is what I have learned. I feel every creator has their own way of navigating challenging things in the world. We are all different types of humans. There are some humans that in the same way that we live our lives, right? There are some humans that if they're going through something, they're immediately going to tell you. Like they're going to be like, and then like they are dumpers and they are seeking conversations. And then there's other humans who go through it quietly with themselves, and it's how they protect themselves and how they are able to move through the process. That's just the way that we are wired at times, and sometimes there's better ways and different situations, and we all are able to do it. We're all able to do it. We can have feedback from our best friends that maybe says, "You know what, Andrea, you probably this is not the time for us to be talking about this. Maybe we can talk about it later." Or, "Hey, Andrea, it seems like you're going through something. Maybe it would be great for you to talk about it." And then you can disclose to them or whatever. All of those things, those are all human things. when you start to add the creator part of it, it becomes so much more nuanced and complicated. And I'm not sure we are able to, I'm not sure, I don't even know what's in quote right. Because what that ends up doing is that it becomes disconnected. It becomes in some ways disconnected, where we're processing human feelings, human emotions through the lens of technology. There's no feedback, immediate feedback coming on. Like even when I'm talking to you right now, obviously I can see you.
Yeah.
I can see you. So there's that. And we're talking in real time. But I know. Woohoo. But if I were just saying this and then that was going out and there was no direct whatevers, I don't have that feedback until later. And it's feedback that's coming to me from like another piece of software, which could be good for you. You're doing great. We love you. That sucks. How dare you talk about that? I can't believe you're talking about these things. And it's like, there's all of this, there's other people involved. Can you imagine going through something and inviting the entire world to participate in you processing something? I can't. That's not who I am. And so when I did disclose all of that stuff within our group, I felt that this is a constant, like I have enough control around the environment and who's listening that I'm able to then be as human as I can here. And there's been times where there has been this layer of challenge in my life, emotional upheaval, whatever that might be, whether it is about the immigration of it all, even my own trauma, dealing with relationships with children, with what else. And I am not the kind of person who can come into the camera and go for it because I need my space. I need to process at my own time. And also, I'm a crier. I'm a very, like, I can, even right now, because I was thinking about it, I'm like, could I talk about this? And I know if I start talking about it, I will start crying. And then what ends up happening is it becomes about me. And that is a lesson that I've had to learn many, 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 many different times. Um, and the world has a thing. Speaking about privilege,
Mhm.
okay? The world has a thing for my eyes crying. Ever since I was little, I was able to turn people into puddles of support with my eyes getting big and tears. And it's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay. Like, let's stop her from going through that, like, because of the whatever presentation of my face. And I was essentially given a pass for anything if I started to cry. And so that became a mechanism of not processing emotion, of not standing, of not being able to take responsibility for my own feelings, for my own actions, for my own wrongdoings, for my own misaligned actions, because I would just go like, make the sad face, puppies and eyes and crying. And then everybody's like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. And so I don't want to get to a point where I just get really pissed off because I'm trying to say something important here and I'm crying and I can't stop because I'm just crying. And I don't want to do that. And therefore I decide, there are times, and there's been, being on with She Podcast, the podcast with Jess. Um, One of the reasons that I have had for not recording is because it's hard. It's hard.
Mhm.
And life, there's a lot of things I don't want to talk about and I don't want to make light of things. And I don't. there's too much liability for me as a person, for me processing, for me being able to honor people that are going through things that are not like me.
Mhm.
And I feel like I'm not able to be responsible for what I feel I should be responsible, whether that's in my head or not. Like, you know what I mean? I'm taking it on, and I would rather not. You know? And I do what I can. I do what I can. I do my job, and for me, it's about moment to moment and being honest with myself. And so I think that's why, to me, also video is a thing. It's like you can't really lie. I don't think you can lie on video and on audio, in all honesty. It's very hard to lie on camera and on especially voice. Oh, it's hard. I don't know if that answered your questions, but
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's always these conversations when you are, or I hear a lot of conversations and discussion around as a public figure, as somebody with a platform, as somebody with visibility, how much of your personal self to share, um, and how much like choosing like the authenticity thing, right? Like how do you so it's two things. It's the authenticity thing in terms of just like anytime, like how much of your personal life do you disclose? How much of what's on
mhm,
your social media is an accurate representation of your life?
mhm,
How much of it is presentational? And it is a little bit I guess I'm maybe hadn't necessarily always thought of it as audience of like choosing what is the right container and who is the right audience for these
mhm,
different aspects of yourself, which are all authentic and they're all part of you. But it's just, it's like sometimes when I go on social media and I'm like, there's some people who, like you said, they share so much personal stuff that I'm like, I love you, but I have to unfollow you for a little while because it's like too much. Like can't, I can't see it. And I can't imagine myself like posting all of that personal detail, emotional stuff on Facebook of all places or something like that. But there's also, I think there's also the dissonance and there was an article that I was reading in The Guardian recently that was talking about the climate that we're in politically, social politically. That's like um horrible things are happening and we're being confronted by horrible things like every day. And yet people also are going about their daily business.
mhm.
And and not to say that that is wrong to do that or that is right to do that, but in our brains and our neuroscience, it creates like this dissonance of like, wait, you're going out to dinner and sitting on a patio and enjoying a lovely cocktail while horrible things are happening. And just like it's a lot for our brains to sort of process. And I think like as creators, and we tend to be more sensitive to these kinds of things. And so it can feel disingenuous even when you are trying to put your authentic self out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that there's also like, this is the very first time in history that we've had to be confronted with a lot of that stuff. I mean, in this scale and the speed in which we are receiving said information,
Mhm,
which in I'm sure during other world events and calamities that have happened in the entire world, there has been a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, a lot of death, a lot of things that have been horrific that have happened within in every part of the world. And I believe that our capacity to be able to process all that information might have been different because we didn't have a fire hose of information coming at us at the same time. So we were able to process small bits of the horrificness of things, because I believe, with let's talking about World War II, everything that happened in World War II, we might, obviously, we knew that there was a lot of death happening all over, hence being a world war. And there was a lot of, the actual military loss and the human loss that we felt as citizens of many different countries, and loss of life and our boys and the work that happened in our daily lives here, especially in the United States, and different types of things that happened, right? But we didn't have, I don't believe, the level of access to all of the horrificness that happened in Europe because of Hitler. We didn't see the images. We didn't hear too much of. I mean, I don't know how fast that information traveled, right? So I think there was a little bit more like, whoa, whoa, that happened.
Yeah.
And it was like a little bit at a time where a few people had their hands in it, as in like they saw, and then that information trickled down to families and other people, and there was like stories, and it became a holistic growth of understanding of all of these things through lived experience and firsthand experience in some way. Whereas now we're getting bits, as in like 15-second snippet, headline, image, and it's just coming. And you're like, is that? And then the awful part is that you don't even know if it's true. Not to say that to discount stuff, because people are recycling things that have happened a long time ago, and it's not really that picture. It's just being repurposed to get more people to click through, and it's just that. And then there's the real stuff that people are going like, is that really real? I don't know if that's real, but it is real. It's like actually happening. And so you kind of don't even know what is happening anymore.
Yeah.
And you only get snippets. There's no nuance. There's no conversation. There's no report. There's no large reading of a book. There's none of that.
Mhm.
It is so frustrating. And that's the part where I don't understand. I don't understand. There is the cognitive dissonance, but I think all of us don't, we're still trying to process it all. We're
Yeah.
still all just trying to live through moment to moment. And for some of us, the the threat is so real at a much greater scale than others of us.
Mhm.
And it depends on where you live,
Yeah.
which is another thing, which is like, for some people, it could be okay. And you might not be impacted as much as other person that's living in a very specific part of the world and or area within the United States, and are a specific type of human living within that context of that. Their life and their nervous system is for sure being affected a lot more than others of us.
Mhm.
That's also a thing.
Yeah. I want to close with a little thought experiment.
Okay.
So we talked about like the responsibility of seeking out more diversity and more inclusive spaces, making a more media ecosystem, a podcasting space that is providing representation for more people and more voices. And we talked about, why it's the right thing to do, even if you were doing it for the wrong reasons. But what's the vision? Like, because it's not just the right thing to do, there's also so much benefit to having
Mhm.
more voices come to the table and having more perspectives and more backgrounds and um more thought leadership, even going back to the
Mhm.
thought leadership example, coming from different frames of reference. And so in your like wildest imagination, what does that world look like when we are including more voices and we are hearing more points of view and getting more ideas from people with more range of experience than just the ones that tend to like get platformed the most and rise to the top? What does that beautiful, inclusive world look and sound like for you?
Oh gosh, what a question. There is an element of being able to understand, and this is so cheesy. This is such a not necessarily, yeah, it's so cheesy. But it's that recognition that we're all the same, which is the most bizarre construct around it. At the core, we are the same. We, at our core, the it is a deeper connectivity that me looking one way isn't m- more or less than someone else based on this sort of societal construct. And obviously, the culture, the society, that systemic nature of the way of our behavior and our own human practices have ripped that understanding sometimes from even the depth of how we teach things. So, why do I say that? Because, one of the things as a parent that I started to think through is in what way could I um, introduce my children to what you're talking about, the diversification of voices, of stories, of geographic areas, of that exposure to a lot. And it started with me in the sense that I needed to consume, like I mentioned before, different types of media and specifically books. I think that was like who were the authors and when they were writing from a different part of the world. I really wanted to know these stories through nonfiction books. I mean, no, fiction books, not nonfiction, through fictional books, right? It's fictional stories. And what I ended up discovering as I was reading all of these books is that they like it was all that, like I finished going like, that's just like me. Right. And it wasn't like me. It's a story from a little girl in a village in Africa. That's not me. But I was like, I've been through that relationship between mother and daughter, or that memory of when she was 9. I remember that. I was that. But that is not me. And never would we have come together in like our paths in the world, but that is like me. So relationships between parents and daughters and children, and love interests and death and dying and family honor and lack of connection with family and love of the land, and all of those things are universal themes that we all have. And I feel if we could really bring that, you would find that essentially we are the same, and but also being able to really uphold the strengths that every layer of culture has, to be able to understand the resilience of different parts of the world and the veracity for their culture, the respect for culture. Stories around that also are reflective to how we can honor ourselves better, because I think that those are things that we've sometimes lost. Um, and understanding that, and I know that this is hard also, and I have to kind of deal with this too, is the fact that just because something's been around for a long time, it doesn't necessarily need to be revered. Just because this is what we've always done, it doesn't necessarily mean it's how we need to move forward. And just because somebody's old doesn't mean that they deserve respect. And it's hard. Those are hard things to kind of deal with personally, and also in the way that and the opposite way, that there's some people who have lived, they're in their 90s and they deserve all of the respect. But again, we have to discern who and how. And I think that the diversity in thought and the diversity in conversations and the diversity within, especially podcasts in your ears, being able to recognize that is so important. And I'm going to just say one last thing, something else that I'm really passionate about. And I don't know if and when I'd be able to execute on this. I actually did it one time and I want to do it again. And I wish that this was like a series of being able to do this. But I did do a panel for something that we did with She Podcast a while ago, and it was a generational panel. And I was really, really into this idea, and I wanted to do it again. I wanted to get um, podcasters, women podcasters specifically, because that's what I love the most. Sorry. Not sorry. The age of it all, like meaning could we get like a, 15-year-old creator and a 20-year-old creator and a 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever, and let's all talk. And what's the difference in how you're creating content versus the 80-year-old? And what can we learn from each other? Because we all have something to share. We all have a lived experience. We all have a diversity of thought. And I think that being able to take the seat of being a student and teacher is really important. We need to know how to do both. And we need to be able to know when we need to be teacher and when we need to be student. And we've lost that in some way, I think, as a society to be able to do that.
Well, there's so much that we could talk about. For days we could talk. Is there anything else that you want to say in this moment before we close officially?
No, I think that it's been so wonderful to be able to talk and talk deep. Do some deep thinking, deep talking. It's always so wonderful, and it is a balm for the soul to be able to have nuanced conversations. So thank you, Andrea, for having me on.
Oh, thank you, Elsie, and thank you, everybody, for watching live, watching replay. In the future, maybe you're listening through your podcast app, however it is that you are joining Elsie and me. Super
Oh,
appreciate you. Oh, the bots decided we were done. They
I
went
know.
fade to black.
I know. I know. Whew.
And of course, I encourage you to check out elsieescobar.com, and all of her socials and everything will be linked in the comments if you're watching the stream, or in the show notes if you're listening to this later. And I thank you so much.
Yay.
And